Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. Cade Kennedy with you, alongside Tyler Riggs. Week 12 in the book. We are officially halfway through November. The playoff push is really heating up, Tyler, and we've got a lot of games to talk about this week. Kind of talking about this before we started recording, there's a lot more that happened than you'd think. When you go back and think about every single big game that happened, there's a lot to talk about this week.
Oh, absolutely. And, when it comes to that playoff push, some things got clarified, some things got a little murkier, maybe. So, ready to dive into it.
Absolutely. But as always, before we get going here, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, all those great things. It only takes a minute or two of your day, but we do appreciate it a lot. We really do. Just sitting there trying to get to that 100 subscriber mark. If we can get to that by the end of 2024, we would sincerely appreciate it. But Tyler, it's time to get into the first big game, the big game, that everyone was hyping up this week, Georgia and Tennessee. And for half, it lived up to the hype. A 17-17 game going to the locker room. Tennessee looked good early. Georgia's offense waking up in the second quarter. And then second half was the Georgia that I think everyone's been expecting to see. The offense looked good. Carson Beck had a productive day. Georgia was able to air it out, and the defense just forcing punt after punt after punt from Tennessee.
Yeah, it was really impressive, watching that second half from Georgia because they did really take control of the game. And, we had talked about it, Cade, going in where this game felt like it was on the shoulders of Carson Beck. And boy, did he answer 347 yards, 2 touchdowns. Still maybe a little inaccurate, but when you're in a big game like this, you can't expect total perfection. He did what he needed to. The Georgia run game did enough to support that as well. So, kudos to Georgia. Backs against the wall, got the big dub.
Absolutely. And I think what stood out to me the most about this is not that Georgia won, it's the way that Georgia won. If you would have told me,
Exactly.
going into the second quarter that Tennessee is a 10-0 lead, they look good on the road early, something that Tennessee struggled a little bit under with Josh Heupel, that Georgia was in a bind. They were in a hole, and this looked like it might be the worst case scenario unfolding. But Georgia in that third quarter and fourth quarter, you look at their 2 drives that they scored on, 7:22 in terms of time of possession in the third, 6:21 in the fourth, having those long grinding drives that Tennessee was having as well. The only problem was Tennessee would take 5 minutes to go 30 yards. Georgia could take 7 to go 87 or 6 to go 92. When you have those long drives like that, Georgia didn't necessarily control time of possession. They won it by a few seconds. But just that gives you that feeling. The defense gets all that rest. They're confident with how they're playing. You give them that rest to continue to build up drive after drive, and it just stacks on top of each other. And Tennessee had no answer for that in the second half.
No, they didn't. It was really, shocking to see Tennessee kind of do the role reversal. They've been closers so far this season. You mentioned those slow starts. Got off to a good one in this for the most part. And they just failed to close the game. That was probably the most shocking part to see Tennessee do that. You had Nico playing, Dylan Sampson on a stat line at least had a good game. Largely Georgia did a good job to force Tennessee kind of away from him. I think that was the real story of the game. That second quarter by Georgia, where they roared back, they kind of retook the control of the tempo of the game, and that's what they did. Continued in the third and fourth quarter, controlled the tempo.
Absolutely. When you're able to, like you said, when you're able to do that, you just have all that momentum going your way. It really does mean a lot in a game like this. You had the crowd behind you. You had everything you could have possibly wanted to go in your favor. And Georgia did exactly what you're supposed to do. When you have everything working like that, you come out and you play a dominant second half.
Yeah, yeah, again, the championship pedigree, we see it, right? This is a program that has done that year after year now under Kirby Smart, and they do it here again at a big spot to put themselves right back in the mix for the college football playoff.
Absolutely. We'll have to see how that works out with all the 2-loss SEC teams. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out when the rankings come out. And of course, we'll have a video for that as well. So feel free to watch that as well, because this will probably get uploaded Tuesday morning or midday. So feel free to come back later for that. Put that little shameless plug in there. But Tyler, you talk about one big game, and we got to go to another one for kind of the completely different reasons, because Kansas and BYU was a game that I think everyone had circled this week that, hey, that something funky is going to happen in this game. BYU's only a 2.5-point favorite. BYU's been, they've cheated death a few times already this season. Kansas is coming off their best game. We had put it on upset watch. It was one that I think everyone was ready to see what would happen. And it looked like BYU was going to get away with it again. Not with one of those, not a fluky win really, but they were just playing well against Kansas. They'd had long drives. They were able to have sustaining drives as well. They looked not to be 100% in control of the game, but seemed to have a fair shake at it. And then it all changes on one pooch punt in the fourth quarter that changes just, not only this game, but might change the Big 12 as a conference for how the rest of the season plays out. Kansas recovers. I don't even want to say a muffed punt. Is kicked at the back of a BYU player. It wasn't really even a muff. It was just a good punt at a great angle.
Yeah, it was. It's crazy to think that, for a game of this magnitude, that it comes down to just that play. Not to over exaggerate it, but it truly was that big momentum shift. I mean, I was watching it live and thought, oh, that might be it for BYU, because points were at premium in this game. Both defenses were reigning supreme. And, play like that, those weird special teams plays that you don't really see very often, sometimes decides a game like this. And that's what we got. So, you could sense that momentum shift in live time there as it happened. And it was just mystifying to kind of watch that play.
Yeah, and then the thing that concerns me a little bit about BYU, and I will talk more about it later on in the show, just the clock management at the end of the game just was head scratching, to say the absolute least, for BYU. We are letting all sorts of crazy things happen. You're running 40 seconds off at a time, knowing, hey, if we don't get this, we kind of need that time to do something. But, alas, they chose not to use it. Kansas able to get away with it. Jalen Daniels had a good performance. Jake Retzloff, not so much when you look at QBR at least. But I think the story of the day for this one, just, like you said, it was a gritty, gutsy defensive battle. It was a cold night. Only 28 degrees is what I believe the commentator said on this one. It was a cold game. It was a, dare I say, Big Ten style of game, Tyler. But Kansas showed that they can win games like this, which, they've now had a lead in every game in the fourth quarter, all 10 games, but they're a 4-6 team. I think it says just as much about Kansas as it does about BYU that don't look at their record. They're still a good football team.
Yeah, they are. And I think a lot of Kansas fans are leaving this game happy, but also scratching their heads like, man, this could have been a totally different season had we just came up clutch in some of those other moments. When we say game of inches, right? This Kansas team, I think, is a perfect example where you look at the season at the end of the year, go, man, a couple bounces here or there, and this could have been a really different season for Kansas because the ingredients were there. We knew that going into the season that, hey, they were right there with everybody else, at the top to throw their hats in the ring, say, hey, we're the new face of the Big 12. We've already owned it in basketball. Let's try to do it in football. It just didn't materialize. Not always does record indicate the strength of the team. And I think we see that with this Kansas State team, or this Kansas team, excuse me.
Absolutely. And, the Big 12 title race is going to look not completely different after this game, but the potential it now opens up is going to be there.
Oh, it got tight.
Yeah, I would say BYU and Arizona State, that's a major matchup now next week. It already was going to be a big one, but we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more. And then Kansas has the opportunity to play spoiler for the third week in a row because they've got Colorado coming to Kansas City this Saturday. That will be a fun one, though. I'm sure we'll get to in our preview video. But yeah, the Big 12, completely different because of one punt. It's amazing how college football works sometimes.
Oh, we see it all the time, Kay. That's what makes it so special.
Absolutely. The next game to get to, though, Tyler, going back into SEC country, Missouri and South Carolina in another game that you really just need to look at this win probability chart, and that tells you the entire game. Just complete chaotic movement in the line midway through the fourth quarter. South Carolina at one point, if you look at this properly, had a 95% chance nearly to win this thing to start the third quarter up 21-6. Defense was in control. Yes, Brady Cook was back. That didn't really seem to mean a lot, but Missouri gets a break or two to go their way. They finally get a touchdown. They get some help. A short field turns into, or a shorter drive turns into a field goal. South Carolina just could not get anything going in that third quarter. Missouri's defense, which they do have a solid defense, showed up in the second half, made this game tighter and tighter and tighter. And something that you really wouldn't think about, but it's what Missouri's been able to do at times this year, is just rely on that run game. You talk about Luther Burton and you talk about Brady Cook and what Missouri has the ability to do through the air, but sometimes just getting it to Nate Noel and seeing what he can do. Keep busting out 5, 3, 4, just being consistent with it, leaning on that run game to, get the defense worn down a bit. That did wonders for Missouri in the second half. It got them back into this game. It gave them the lead, and it looked like setting up the big pass to Luther Burden at the end was going to win this thing for Missouri. You go, okay, 30-27. Are we going to have this conversation that, no, Missouri is actually legit? And then South Carolina rips it away right at the end. Raheem Sanders, 15-yard reception from Lenore Sellers. And South Carolina somehow finds a way to get the job done.
Yeah, what a gutsy game from South Carolina and for Coach Beamer. Like, really a tell of two halves. You think, oh man, South Carolina is going to win this going away. I told somebody, I'll be honest. I told somebody before that game, said, hey, feel good about South Carolina covering, 10 plus on the spread. I think times it kind of waned depending on if Brady Cook was going to play. And I felt good about that because it seemed like the momentum was going to swing in their favor and everything was looking good in that first half. Missouri rallied, showed that, they had a little moxie to them. But at the end, South Carolina was, and you told me this one, this is to you, and we were talking about it afterwards, where you said it was kind of the reverse of what happened with Oklahoma. Absolutely it was. You think Missouri's storm back and get it, and then all of a sudden they find a way to pull defeat out of the clutches of victory. So, big win for South Carolina. That's a program builder, right? We talked about the South Carolina team. Coach Beamer was getting to the point where he could really start selling what they're doing there. You've got some exciting players there, some guys that you know are going to be back next year, that you could really start selling to transfer portal guys, to some of these late recruits. And you never know. This is one of those that when you look back, next year at this time, if South Carolina is really rocking it, you go, man, this is one of those wins that helped turn that tide a little bit, man.
Absolutely. And to kind of hit one more point off the win probability and then kind of build off what you said, at one point in this thing, in the span of 11 minutes, we shifted from South Carolina had an 82% chance to win the game with 12 minutes left to Missouri having an over 80% chance to win with 1 minute left. That's where we were in this type of game. And South Carolina seems to have these moments a lot this year where they'll just have a random 5 to 10 minutes where it's just, okay, the game seems settled. Now we're going to go back and forth, back and forth. You can never really have a dull moment watching South Carolina football. And I think, like you said, Shane Beamer can build off this. You can say, hey, we continue to win games. It doesn't matter if they're ugly or not. It doesn't matter if they're weird or not. We win games against top 25 programs. Lenore Sellers had 5 touchdowns in this game. He had some, just absolutely pull a rabbit out of a hat type stuff where he looks absolutely dead to right. 15-yard sack with 40 seconds left in the game. Nope, breaks one tackle, runs out of it, launches it downfield, and it's a 30-yard gain going the other way. There's just time after time this year where South Carolina has looked dead and has come back, or they've looked alive and then been dead, but then they find a way to come back at the end anyway. It doesn't matter what seems to happen. South Carolina has that momentum at all times, or at least knows how to get it. And with the last 2 games South Carolina's got, they have Wofford and they have Clemson. They should be, I'm going to say it right now, they should be a 9-3 team at the end of the year.
Now let's know.
They should be a 9-3. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But barring something crazy, I think they should be in contention to be a playoff caliber team potentially at the end of the year, Tyler.
Yeah, probably, if they're able to do that, we'll probably be a team just on the outside looking in. And again, we'll just be, able to say, look at the season they had. And so many young pieces on the squad that excite you and give you a shot to really put yourself in a conversation for next year. I mean, Lenore Sell's just a freshman, right? He's had a really good season when he's been in there and been healthy, and I think that plays to some of those instances of 1 minute they look great, the next minute it kind of falls apart for a little bit. It's just signs of a young team that's learning how to be consistent. And they've done enough to show that they've got the capabilities to close those games out. Now for South Carolina, really the focus should be, can we show consistency these next couple of weeks? Obviously, you're going to do it against Wofford, but can you go into that Clemson game and deliver yet again?
Yeah, and that's going to be the big one to see how that all develops. But Tyler, we've got to stay in SEC country. The next one to get to, Florida and LSU, a fun rivalry game. We talked about this a lot. When you get a game like this, weird things can happen in it. And DJ Lagway came back, and you would look at the stat line and go, okay, 13 for 26, 226. That doesn't seem amazing, but it's how he's able to get those big plays where it's just, okay, casually throw a 20, 25, 30-yard pass downfield, and that's one of his 13 completions. That's how he seems to play sometimes, Tyler. He didn't look as mobile, still recovering from his injury, obviously. But Florida, a 27-16 win over LSU that I think just continues the spiral of Brian Kelly. And will his days be numbered is going to be one of the big takeaways from this.
Yeah, it is. And we had talked about that going in, where this was a huge potential victory for uh, Billy Napier if he pulled off, right? To bounce back from that Texas game after you got the vote of confidence. And again, another team with some young, exciting players that you could sell to potential recruits, transfer portal guys. Hey, come play for us next year. Look what we got. And for LSU, it was really, it, where do you go from here, right? That was kind of the question if they were to lose this game, because now you're spiraling. Now you've lost a couple big ones. You've lost one that you shouldn't. Where do you go from here if you're LSU? Do you look at getting rid of Brian Kelly? Do you move on? A lot of questions for the Tigers. We knew they had weak spots. I mean, that was clear. We talked all the time on the show about how they are one dimensional. Sometimes that dimension was good enough to carry them through a lot of games. But now you can see where, hey, against better competition or a team that at least knows how to deal with your good points, this is where you wish you had some of that balance and more of a complete team. And I think that's the story and the lesson we learned here is that LSU just isn't a complete team this season.
Absolutely. And when you're able to dominate time of possession like they did in this game, remember, when you average it out, they won time of possession this game 42-18 in terms of
Yeah.
minutes. You should not be losing a game with that. When you win the yardage battle, when you have double the first downs nearly as Florida, when you're able to sit on the ball, it doesn't matter because your defense gives up these big chunk plays or puts yourself in a bind. LSU had allowed 7 sacks in this game. They had only allowed 6 all season, or 6 in conference play. I can't remember the stat I saw on it, but there's just absolutely a game that nothing went their way. Yet it felt like everything went their way. If you just looked at the box score, you'd go, okay, Nussmeier didn't play amazing, 27 for 47, but he had 260 and a touchdown. Caden Durham, 91 yards on 20 carries. Josh Williams, 13 carries, 69 yards. A running game developed for LSU. That's something they hadn't been doing in conference play. And none of it mattered at the end. It's just crazy to think about that, Tyler, that at all these stats and everything we talked about, that if this happens, this should be the result. A lot of that went in LSU's favor, and they still couldn't get the job done. I mean, what
No.
does that say
Yeah.
about LSU? Because you have Vanderbilt coming up and you have Oklahoma coming up. And those are two games that on paper you'd think you'd be able to win. But we know that Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia, who we've talked about a lot, he can be a dual threat guy. That's your big glaring weakness on the defensive side of the ball. How do you stop a guy who presents the ability to have that dual threat to him? Oklahoma doesn't have that as much with Jackson Arnold, but who knows if they were to somehow make a switch to Michael Hawkins, then that would become a problem again. There's a lot to look at for LSU. And I mean, my goodness, if you don't go 8-4 at this point, I really do not know what that conversation, if it's had or not, about Brian Kelly. I would think it would be if you lose to Vanderbilt this week. It would have to be
Yeah,
had.
that's you would have to think about it, right? And I think you could hear it with a lot of Tiger fans of just, hey, clearly this ain't going in the right direction. That's the biggest deal. So now, here's the problem for LSU, because this is, you know, a conversation has already been rumbling. We mentioned that going into the week. Ryan Kelly right now has about a $60 million buyout left on that contract, because he's got a $95 million contract that runs through 2030.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that? People say, "Oh, that's crazy. You can't do that." Hey, Texas A&M showed the world. You get enough boosters fired up, you can buy out anybody. They spent 150 mil buying out the entire staff. So we know that Tiger fan base is passionate. So what happens with that? That will be the interesting thing to watch. Like I said, boy, if they lose to Vandy, and then not only that, if they don't beat Oklahoma soundly, which you know we've documented Oklahoma struggles offensively on this channel, both being fans. But that defense is good enough to at least try to hold them a bit. So it could get real ugly real quick for Brian Kelly if things don't shape it up in the next couple weeks.
Absolutely. And to kind of talk about this from the Florida side, because I don't want to just look at this as, oh, well, LSU's garbage and that's your main takeaway from this. You'd said it a little bit. If you're going to continue to try to build this program up, if you're Billy Napier, to even have a shot, this was a good thing to show recruits. Yeah, you're going to look at and say, what, they're 5-5? You got to remember, at the beginning of the year, everyone was talking about Florida had one of, if not the toughest schedule in the country with everybody they had. Now, some of that broke their way. Florida State being terrible helps a lot there. But to look at that and say, hey, we had a schedule that we were supposed to go 4-8 or 5-7, and we're going to make a bowl game out of this. Yeah, it's not going to be a great bowl game, but to show that we had this happen with Graham Mertz being hurt, with DJ going down to your third string quarterback and taking Georgia down to the wire in Jacksonville, where it's a 4-quarter game against a Georgia team that everyone knows what they're capable of. You saw it this week against Tennessee. To say you have all that going there, I don't want to. We see it a lot. If you follow social media, a lot of people joke on Billy Napier a lot, and some of that is deserved. There were some head-scratching moments in this game, as there have been in every Florida game. But this is a great win to show that, hey, this is what Florida can be.
Yeah, and that, creates some excitement, right? Because it gives you that. We were talking about at the beginning of the season, not if, but when Billy Napier is gone. And that has changed completely, right? So there's hope there. And it also brings you some pressure, if you're Napier in this program, to now go out and perform and continue to build to finish the season. Because, like you said, it's not a season where they're going to make headlines. But, boy, you get a bowl game out of this with how tough of a schedule they had and finish on that high note of, hey, this is a program on the rise. Narrative, as we know, Cade, especially in the day of 24/7 media, with these kids that are always on social media, the narrative of what are you doing right now has meaning. It has impact.
Yeah, sometimes the narrative might be more important than what's actually happening, Tyler.
Exactly. As crazy as that sounds, people just aren't patient, right? We know that. It's a what can you do for me right now society. Not what have you done for me. It's what can you do for me right now. So that seemingly changes by the minute. So the more you could generate, if you're Florida positive coming out of this season, the better, man. I mean, you can make 6-6. You make a bowl game look really good at the end of the day.
Absolutely. But Tyler, we've got one more big game to talk about for games of the week. And it was another one that we both believed had the potential to get interesting at the very least. We said, why in the world is Kansas State a 7.5-point favorite against Arizona State? Arizona State's going to bring their A game. They had Cam Scatterbo back. And if you would have told me Cam Scatterbo, 25 carries, 73 yards, DJ Giddens, 14 carries for 133, I would have said, uh-oh. The Kansas State might have actually made us look fools in this one. And we kind of were. We said this would be a 7-point game. And it was 24-0 Arizona State midway through the third quarter. This looked like Arizona State was absolutely going to blast K-State for a while. The Sun Devils came to play. They had a lot going for them. Kansas State 3 turnovers in this game, 2 picks from Avery Johnson. Arizona State holding on to time of possession, 36-23. K-State just never really came to life in this game. Had one missed field goal and 1 botched snap. Special teams not looking good for the Cats. A whole lot not going K-State's way. And now they've got to face the reality of this was a season where everyone thought you could compete for a Big 12 title. And now you're sitting down at 7-3. You're not technically out of it, but it feels like you are.
Yeah, I mean, what a disappointment for Kansas State. And we had warned about, like you said, we're like, hey, this Arizona State team's legit, and especially getting back Scatterboo. But you gotta give credit, I think, to the freshman Sam Levitt. We've seen him a couple of times this year, and there's spurts where he looks like a quarterback that is playing a bit beyond that redshirt freshman tag, right? He makes good decisions. He, for the most part, takes care of the ball. He doesn't commit a lot of turnovers, and he knows how to use his weapons. He knows how to find those guys around him that are going to make him look like a good quarterback. And Cade, that's sometimes the ingredients to a good quarterback is just being smart of how to spread that ball around. And I thought he did a really good job in this game. That gave him that early push, that early advantage. You didn't have to rely on Cam Scatterboo to get it done. Levitt dropped some dimes, and they used that to win the game. That momentum was huge. It was the tale of two young quarterbacks, one looking a lot better than the other. Fortunately for Kansas State fans, it wasn't their quarterback.
Absolutely. And we talk about Scatterboo, what he's able to do as a runner. 4 catches for 44 yards. He was able to switch things around, which we've talked about him enough that he's just a football guy. If you can imagine a dude out there on the field, it's a guy like Cam Scatterboo. But Jordan Tyson, just what a day he had, popping off for 176, 2 touchdowns on 12 catches. He played
Yeah.
absolutely phenomenal. This Arizona State defense came to play as well. I mean, that goes without saying. You held K-State to 14. But Arizona State, I've had this conversation with you on this show before, and I'm going to bring it up again. Kenny Dillingham is that guy. He's a young coach, but you could see it, how he has come back to a place that he went to school at, that he played at, that he talked about, I want to be here for moments like this. And now he's doing it. He's got Arizona State possibly, 2 wins away from playing in the Big 12 championship game. He's got Arizona State, a program that looked absolutely just demolished after what had happened with Herm Edwards being there. A program that looked like it may not be competitive for a while. It would take a long time to build it up. And now here they are, 8-2. They're going to be ranked this week. They better be. If they're not, something criminal has happened.
Somebody fell asleep at the
Yeah,
wheel.
a lot of people fell asleep at the wheel, and we know where to go find them. But Arizona State, just phenomenal what they continue to do every single week.
Well, and I think and we've talked about this too, especially when it comes to the Oklahoma side of things, both off the show and on the show, where people think, oh, if you're not careful, you're going to slip back to being what Nebraska has been, right? Where you were a old power no longer. With the transfer portal, with NIL, you get the right guy, you get the right energy around that guy. Things could turn around quick. We talked about with Indiana. You see it with Kenny Dillingham here at Arizona State. Things could go in a hurry in the right direction just as easily as they could go sour and go the wrong direction. So I think Arizona State, if you're a fan base out there that's looking for some hope, silver lining, if your team's kind of in the dumpsters, so you point to them and say, hey, maybe we can be Arizona State here soon and get it turned around quick.
Absolutely. But Tyler, it is time to get to one of our favorites. I think it's one of our favorite segments. I'm pretty sure it is. It's time to get to Champions of Life of the Week
Oh,
and Fraud
the
Alert.
favorite segment. I don't know what you're talking about.
But Tyler, for Champions of Life of the Week, we've got to go to a very special New Mexico team that we talked about all the way back in week
Uh,
0. It's the last time we
we
talked
did.
about it. And we said, hey, they lost to Montana State, but they only lost that game by 3. And that means something to New Mexico that they only lost that game by 3. Now, a normal person would look at that and say, that's terrible. You lost to an FCS team. What the heck is a Montana State? How did you do that? But Bronco Mendenhall, what he's been able to do in just 1 year out there in Albuquerque, beating Washington State 38-35. This New Mexico team gets the first win over a top 25 team since beating Utah back in 2003 in the middle of the Mountain West heyday. Just absolutely impressive what the Lobos were able to do. And I mean, you talk about a game that Washington State seemed to have put this thing away, 28-14 going into the half. All Wazoo has to do is just, score 1 or 2 more times. And this game is probably done in the third, fourth quarter. You start looking forward to, hey, Washington State, we can have that conversation. They're going to maybe be an 11-1 team. And New Mexico said, not today. That is not what we're going to do today. Devin Dampier had other plans. And he's a phenomenal kid to watch. And I think we talked about it a little bit in the week 0 that, hey, this New Mexico team
Yeah.
showed some fun stuff. 534 yards of offense. I mean, they just played absolutely lights out in this one. And Dampier's a guy that you look at his passing stats and they're not amazing. 11 for 25, 174 and a touchdown. But look at that rushing attack that he had. 28 carries for 193 and 3 touchdowns. Eli Sanders
And Cade,
for 108 and a touchdown.
and you talk about Dampier, and I want to really brag on this kid because this is a guy, I think we mentioned him a little bit, kind of going into the, on the heels of that Montana State game, talking about the Arizona game they were going to play and lost that one in a bit of a shootout, obviously. This kid, 5'10, 198. He's undersized. You're not going to look at him and he screams quarterback. He's from Tucson, so that was a big moment, to go play Arizona. And to see him continue to develop as a young sophomore. A guy, like I said, a little erratic in the passing game, 12 touchdowns, 12 picks, only 57% completion percentage, but he is a show. This game marked his 4th out of the last 5 now that he's run for 100 yards plus. You look at the last 3 games against Wyoming in that chaotic loss, 207 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. Against San Diego State in the win, 17 carries, 127 yards, no touchdowns, but did his job. And then, like I said, the big game this past week again, just huge, just huge when you got a dual threat guy like that. And Bronco Mendenhall has put this team from a 4-8 squad that generally sits, in the bottom of the Mountain West, like, oh, hey, New Mexico, LOL. No, they're on the verge now of potentially going bowling. Still got to go get another dub, but I think that's attainable for them. You look back at their schedule and what they've done. We talk about that Montana State game. They had a close loss or two. One to Wyoming, who's not a terrible team. They took Colorado State to task, made them earn that win. So a lot to enjoy from this New Mexico squad. Now you just got to go get it done against Hawaii. Hawaii by the way, got throttled by Utah State, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that we were talking about the Lobos going bowl.
Absolutely. If they do, if they hit that 6-6, they might be in the New Mexico Bowl, which would be a home game for them. If they can get that win there, then this is still a month away we're talking about. There's still a lot of ifs to get to. But if you could somehow establish yourself, hey, year 1 come in 7-6, got a bowl win. If you could somehow lock down Dampier to come back, you've got a pretty good shot at being a decent team in the Mountain West next year, Tyler. You can start to, like we've talked about a little bit already on some of the other games we've recapped here, that potential of just what we can be, that narrative, getting it out there that, hey, there can be some fun out here in New Mexico. We play an interesting style of ball. There's going to be a lot of QB run game. You don't have to rely on, like you see a lot of modern offenses now, where you've got to throw it 30 times and pray that you can get 200, 250 in the passing attack, 2-3 touchdowns through the air. Just rely on the ground. You look at it, 49 carries for 360. It's over 7 yards a carry, Tyler. When you're able to dominate like that, just play that physical brand of football, it's a lot of fun to watch, and it could get you some pretty good results, obviously, as seen here.
Absolutely. I like to say, the triple option didn't go anywhere. The old school triple option, it just evolved into shotgun look a lot of times. You look at what some of these teams are doing, out of the spread system, it's really triple option, just, with the different look. So maybe one day Army and Navy can kind of update themselves to that. But until then, I like getting the best of both worlds.
Absolutely. So New Mexico, again, congratulations, a well-deserved champion of life of the week. Now, Tyler, who do you have as your nomination? I believe we're kind of staying in the same general area, I believe.
Yeah, I got to go right back to Arizona State for a lot of the reasons we talked about. Not only was this just a statement win, but this puts you right into that picture for the Big 12 championship race. That's going to be the most fascinating race to watch. And here's the fun part about Arizona State and what Coach Dillingham could sell his guys. They've got BYU next. Arizona State has a legit shot to control their destiny because they've got the tiebreaker over Arizona State, right? In the conference standings right now. You go beat BYU, you could put yourself in the Big 12 title game. We could be talking about an Arizona State team that all of a sudden has risen their way to maybe a college football playoff appearance and spoil some rankings out there. Because remember, folks, it's the top 5 ranked conference champions get an automatic bid. And Arizona State would get in, and they could potentially slide into a bye, depending on how the committee would approach maybe a Arizona State, Boise State ranking there. But that would be huge. I mean, just to go from that Cincinnati loss, where you built up such great momentum, then you drop one on Cincinnati, and you turn around, you beat Oklahoma State pretty convincingly, you escape UCF, you beat Kansas State, you beat BYU, you beat the in-state rival of Arizona, and you claim the Big 12 championship. That would be a magical run for this Arizona State team. So for me, champions of life put themselves into the mix right back there to maybe spoil the Big 12. For a team, by the way, that was picked, I think it was last or near last in the conference.
Yeah, so I think the big thing I kept seeing was I believe it was CBS Sports or one of the other places that had posted it. It was the media poll for, who's some of the better coaches in the Big 12. And
Right.
Kenny Dillingham he was either last or he was second to last along with Deion Sanders down there. It was one of those where no one had any faith in this Arizona State team going into the year. Absolutely, and I believe even when we did our preview, it was, hey, Cam Scadaboo's fun. That's your Arizona State preview because that was all anyone knew about him. But they've really gelled together. They've put together a lot of pieces that have slept and gone under the radar. And Arizona State, I don't want to rehash everything I've already said here, but the future looks bright, man. In Kenny Dillingham, you've got to trust out in Tempe, and I know they do.
And they better lock him up quick. That's all I got to say.
I was going to say,
I
was about to say, if Oklahoma Brett Venables doesn't work out, I know one of the guys I would like. I'm sorry, Arizona State fans. I will go find our athletic director and let him know I would like one Kenny Dillingham, which is a good thing that you want a coach like that. I'm not trying to, some of that's, kind of joking, but some of that is serious as well, where if you're a coach that, you got to get a guy you want. You got to get a guy that's a winner, and he's showing he could be a winner. But Tyler, we've had our fun with the champions of life of the week. Now it's time to get over to fraud alert. And this is one that I've been wanting to get to for a while. Same with Miami. Finally able to tackle them. It's BYU. What are we doing here?
Cade.
What are we doing here, BYU? Some might call them Mormon Miami this season with how they've been able to.
No, not Mormon Miami.
With how they've been able to escape games they won, but they didn't really feel like they won. Oklahoma State comes to mind. Utah comes to mind. Games where I don't know if you were really the better team the entire game, but you found a way to win it. Some would say that's the mark of a champion, and I agree. When you're able to, you get one mulligan, but to nearly blow a lead to Baylor, but to have the battle with Oklahoma State where you couldn't stop a team that has just fallen apart offensively. Some of that's a quarterback change. Well, guess what? Garrett Rangel gets injured. Alan Bowman comes in, and he played well against him. And then Utah, a team that does not have that much of an offense, had to switch quarterbacks again because of injuries. Brandon Rose came in. He played all right. Utah had a double-digit lead. You could say, yeah, that's a rivalry game, but that's a Utah team you should still be capable of beating and not have to come and march down the field right at the end to kick a game-winning field goal. This is a BYU team that they have some big wins this year, but I've never felt 100% confident that they should be this, number 6 team in the country. They had to be there by default because they kept winning and had good wins, but now that they finally lost, just like Miami, I am at peace, Tyler. I am at peace in the world.
All these haters just coming out of the woodwork, burying BYU. I'm disgusted.
But, this is a game that with Kansas, when you hold them to 17 points, you should win this game. Kansas does not have an amazing defense at all. This is not some elite Kansas defensive unit. BYU, I finally want to get into that clock management I talked about earlier with them. Let's just look at the play-by-play chart, Tyler. We don't do this often, but let's just look at it. Let's go all the way down to the end of the game here. BYU has a 4-minute drive to try to get something done, and you look at it late. 4th and 6 to 4th and 11 is what I'm looking at the most here. BYU gets called for a false start. You get a 10-second runoff off of that, I believe, or something ridiculous happened in it where BYU just let the clock run. Why are you letting the clock run that late in the game? I get that you didn't want to burn a timeout or you didn't want to put yourself in a situation like that, and I get that. But why are you waiting and letting, nearly a minute run off the clock here? You should have your play ready to go for 4th and 11. This is one of those things that it just bugs me to death, Tyler, that teams do not. I don't know how you don't have a guy that can explain clock management or something like that. I get some head coaches are way better at it than others, but this is just something that has always driven me insane when you're just letting time tick down, tick down, tick down, and everyone in the stadium knows, hey, we have to literally score or get a first down here or the game is over, and you're just sitting there letting that clock run. You've got to have some sort of end of game script that you work out here or something you'd go through in practice, I would think, over this, right?
Yeah, that, and we always scratch our heads at it as fans. For whatever reason, sometimes the clock management aspect of a coach gets overlooked quite a lot. Not everybody can be Dan Lanning, okay, when it comes to that. It's unfortunate, but yeah, and that kind of highlights the bigger issues with this game for BYU. It's just sloppy. A lot of mental mistakes, a lot of uncharacteristic. You say uncharacteristics. I mean, you pointed out they kind of skated by, but things they hadn't done so far this season in terms of mistakes, all kind of showed up in this one. And that's what cost them the game. Really disappointing there for the Cougs. Hashtag
Absolutely.
those who believe in the Cougs.
You just still believing?
Still believe in the Cougs.
We'll have to see when we get to that BYU Arizona State game. But Tyler, that is not the only fraud I have of the week, because my goodness, something more embarrassing happened than that. Stanford, a 38-35 win over Louisville. And I'm going to make Louisville feel a little bit better. This is not a fraud alert for Louisville. This is a fraud alert for the ACC as a whole.
I don't know if that helps them, Cade.
It doesn't help them, but it should make them feel better. Because this entire conference this week, I don't know if everyone just wanted to gang up on Miami to make sure they don't get in the playoffs no matter what. I don't know what in the world happened this week with the ACC. And some of it's not even all the players and coaches. We'll get to some of it. I've got my piece to say when we get to Clemson and Pitt, because they're on here too. But just Louisville, what are you doing here? This is a massive win for Stanford, and I'm happy for Stanford. Troy Taylor trying to build something out of the ruins of what that program has been. But how do you let Stanford even get a field goal off here? How do you let that happen? Louisville has an opportunity to punt the ball at the 45-yard line and just let this thing go to overtime. Now, I get you want to be aggressive on fourth down maybe and have a shot at a Hail Mary, and I get that. And I'm not 100% mad about that decision to go for it. What I am mad about is you then commit a 15-yard unsportsmanlike because you get stuck on a guy and try to shove him to the ground on the sideline with an official 5 feet away from you who is looking at you trying to help you get off of him if he walks over there a few more feet. Just, you have to have some sort of common sense on the field, and then you jump offside on a 57-yard field goal, and Louisville at the end of the game just hands it to Stanford. I mean, this is just, again, mental mistakes from everybody. That's kind of the theme of the week here that I'm getting to, is just people not using their heads. I don't know what is happening. I don't know if the pressure is getting to everyone or what, but Louisville blowing a 35-21 lead in the final 9 minutes of this game is just inexcusable for them. It's just inexcusable. I thought Louisville was above this. It turns out they are not.
Oh, it's enough to make a coach cry, Cade. You mentioned that sportsmanlike. I mean, you're giving away the game. I mean, absolutely, 1,000%. And that's the one that stings the most, when it's like, hey, we literally handed our opponents the win.
Absolutely.
That's when it stings the most.
And it was a day where Louisville had 2 100-yard receivers. It was a day where their offense looked good, but their defense just, Emmett Mosley the fifth, shout out to him. I don't want to turn this into just 100% negative. He played great. 13 catches for 168, 3 TDs. But you've got to make sure you stop him at some point. This reminds me of Colorado Stanford last year with Iamaner going off. If a guy is hot and he's getting these big plays, Tyler, you've got to find a way to either double him or bracket him or do something.
Got to be some adjustments, no question.
Absolutely.
Basic principle of coaching.
Just basic principles of life we're about to get to in this next game, because Clemson and Pitt, What are we doing here? Like,
You're handing out all the hate for the ACC.
legitimately, in this one, not even as much the players. I want to talk about one specific call that, Tyler, I kid you not, might be up there for the dumbest, most ridiculous penalty that finally got called. It's baffling. Before I blow a gasket here, it's baffling. We had a situation late in the game where Pittsburgh quarterback gets hit, Nate Yarnell gets hit in the face. And I mean, it wasn't like it might have been inadvertent, but just full arm comes across, bam, smacks him so hard that he nearly gets his helmet knocked off, and his head, you completely see him jerk his entire head back. And then the officials did not call a penalty. Right. It was forceful enough contact that you could have looked at it for targeting. I'm not saying it should have been. I'm just saying the fact that there was no discussion whatsoever, and it took Pat Narduzzi, who made several of his own mistakes, we'll get to that in a moment, where he's out there begging to call a timeout, like, hey, please look at this. Please, I've never seen anything like this, except for the fact that it's kind of like the Georgia-Texas Bottlegate situation that happened earlier this year, except no bottles were necessary because the refs finally got together. I don't know if someone looked at it on the Jumbotron or what, but they're finally like, yeah, I don't know, maybe we should have done a penalty there, I guess. Okay. It's just like, what are we doing? What is happening in the ACC this year? Honestly, does anyone in that conference know what they're doing? This is...
Hey, I'll tell you what's happening. SMU's back, baby.
But SMU struggled this week. SMU nearly got themselves put on this too, but they at least were able to pull away, so they get credit. They're not on fraud alert. They survived. They got very close to being put on fraud alert this week as well, but they did not.
Not the Mustangs. But not just the Mustangs. Hashtag believe in SMU.
Okay, Tyler. Okay. But I want to see if I can find the drive here while I'm ranting about it, because it might have been one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. Here it is. This 8-minute drive, I believe, is what it was for Pitt, where it's just embarrassing, dare I say, where Pittsburgh had, here it was, the delay of game, the false start, illegal formation, all in a row, where you're just, what is happening? How do you get 3 penalties in a row there? Where, I can get, okay, illegal formation, then you get a delay of game, then you get a false start, which was about to be a delay of game, and then on the incomplete pass, they nearly got another delay of game. Like, it was unbelievable. Where Pitt just had several moments where it's just, let's keep getting the same penalty over and over. They had another sequence where they had back-to-back-to-back offsides.
It's a comedy of errors, Cade, that you quite honestly only see usually with bad high school football teams, much less Division I college football teams.
Absolutely. And then, Pitt's defense shuts Clemson down all day running the ball, which meant, of course, the game ended on a 50-yard rushing TD by Cade Klubnik. And, and I'm not going to take away from that for Clemson, but just there was a Pitt safety that just stood there and just let Klubnik run around him. And once I saw that, it was just, I went from rooting for Pitt, and this would have been like, yeah, let's cause some chaos here too. You don't deserve to win this game. I'm sorry. With everything that happened, I was rooting for you, Pitt. But my goodness, you can't do all of that and still expect to win a game. I'm sorry. It's just inexcusable, unbelievable. And then I want to end on one final thing here, Tyler, because I've gone at just about everybody today.
Sure. Well, that finished off.
And I want to reserve this for coaches who like to go for it on 4th and 1 at their own 30 or 34-yard line. Please stop. You are not helping anyone.
College football 25.
This is not Madden. This is not NCAA 25. Please stop doing that. Yeah, you might get it and keep your drive going, but as I saw multiple times this week, if you get stopped, you might as well give up the touchdown. It's such a momentum killer and a momentum flipper that I don't know why why you're trying to get that aggressive. And I'm seeing coaches do this in the 2nd and 3rd quarter. Texas A&M did it a few weeks ago against South Carolina on the first drive of the game. where it's just like, what are we doing here? Has everyone lost their mind, Tyler, or am I dumb? I honestly don't know, because I might just be dumb and not know how analytics work. But
Well, see, that's the thing. Sometimes analytics gets people, they read too much
yeah,
into the stats. I think this in one simple way because this was converging things that happened that I noticed in society. So we all remember Moneyball,
yeah,
right? Yes. And of course, when they released the movie Moneyball, what happens like 2 months later? There was a movie that dueled with it called Trouble with the Curve that was anti Moneyball, basically, with, uh, kind of the other perspective of, hey, screw the stats. I know what my eyes tell me, the eye test.
mm-hmm.
And I think it's what people fail to realize that the true medium, the true happy spot lies somewhere in between, right? Like
Right.
that's really where it should be. Yes, analytics is good, but sometimes you can also just rely on some good old fashioned, hey, this is what they do, this is what a football decision is like. Punting on 4th and 1 from your own 35 is a football decision where it's like, hey, this is proven time and time again to probably be the right call. Yeah, I could get fancy with analytics, go for it. But generally there's a reason people do this. So that's where we're at, where people got to figure out there is a happy medium between analytics and good old fashioned. Hey, I know what my gut is telling me.
Absolutely. It's one of those that it just bugs me, because I agree with a lot of analytical decisions, but do that once you've at least established something. Don't, hey, we got 9 yards on this drive. I'm feeling it, baby. It's definitely going to be land on the 30 and black at the roulette wheel this time. It hasn't all night, but it's gotta be. We're due.
It's
It,
gotta be.
it
We're
just,
due. Oh
it's
no.
that 99% of gamblers stop just before they've hit it rich type of just ridiculous meme that I get the logic behind it, but I don't understand why you would ever apply it unless you absolutely had to, or just felt like you didn't respect that defense enough. Which, I don't get why you're doing that in a major college football game. I can understand that, when you're playing a team you feel really comfortable against, but not in a big game in November. Please, can we not do this? At least not until you have to. But Tyler, I've said enough. I'm almost red in
You
the
got
face
really
at this
worked up
point.
there, buddy. Yeah, you
Yeah,
got the sometimes for all the week's good to get some anger out. That's just how it is.
absolutely. It's just that watching all of that happen nearly in a row too, from the Clemson Pitt game to the Louisville Stanford later on. SMU was on around that same time. Kansas BYU that night. That was something that had been building up all week, where I was just like, come on, what are we doing here?
No, Cade Kennedy, known ACC hater supreme. So
For now,
got that.
you gotta find some way to get me back. But
I
Tyler,
cannot do that for you.
yeah, I know that's the problem here, is that you cannot do anything to fix that. But what you can do is give me your fraud of the week.
Oh man, I won't go on huge rants. These are more kind of got some sadness, got some I told you so. So we'll start with Missouri because Eli Drinkwitz got was over there touting, with the win over OU. Oh, we're back in the playoff hunt. That's right, I said it. He's going after Bob Stoops. And serves him right to go get beat the next week by South Carolina. That one felt good to watch. Missouri, definite fraud of the week. I have never been a Brady Cook believer. I don't get the hype around the guy. And it turns out he doesn't matter. He doesn't matter. Has great weapons. Luther Burden, Theo East. They still can't close the deal against South Carolina. That one felt good. Frauds of the week. Missouri. No question about it. And then this one, a little tearful for me. A little upsetting. After they poured 55 on Arkansas State, my boys, the Raging Cajuns of Louisiana, turn around. They lay an egg against South Alabama. They lose. Oh, sadness. Sadness for me there. I didn't want to do it for the week, but it had to, right? I've been bragging, talking about. Then they go lay an egg. Good news is Raging Cajuns still on top of their division. That's right. The Sun Belt still does divisions. Hashtag bring back divisions.
I agree with that.
But
We
they're on,
do need divisions.
yes, they're on top of, or at least pods for the mega conferences. Like, give me pods of 4. Anyways, still got a chance in the Sun Belt, but obviously no craziness is going to befall them to where we could maybe I could get real chaotic and try to push for Louisiana in the playoff. Not happening this year. Sad. Frauds of the week, the Raging Cajuns. Hate to do it, but
Dang.
I'm fair. I'm fair.
You're being fair. Sometimes it's hard to do, but you got to do it at the end of the day.
Like disciplining your own children. It's
There you
tough.
go. There you go. But finally, it is time to make it out of fraud alert into the power rankings tile, the AP top 25 on the board or on the screen. I don't know why I'm saying on the board. I've completely lost it, Tyler. This is what happens when I get sick. My brain starts wandering in other places. But starting with the top 5 teams, in the power 4 to look at it just a little bit. I'm gonna be a little chalk, kind of keep with what I've been going at here. Oregon staying at number 1 had the scare against Wisconsin. Looked sluggish. A lot of that game, some of that can be attributed to Tez Johnson didn't play. Dylan Gabriel didn't look amazing in it, but when Oregon had to make big plays, they did. Eventually, at the end of the game, it happened. Oregon able to change the tide in this one and get the 16-13 win. Ohio State, you want to talk about a slow start for Ohio State out at Wrigley Field. Just could not get anything going for a while. Northwestern wanting to eat up the clock. That's a lot of why you saw that. Northwestern scores early second quarter. This is when you flip over and go, hey, what's happening? Northwestern's up 7-0. What are we doing here? And then Ohio State, they woke up after that. Not an impressive win score-wise, but still, Ohio State played like Ohio State from the second quarter onward. I've still got Texas at number 3. I know a lot of people will probably want to shift around and say, hey, Texas, where's their big win? What do they have? I'm still going to keep them at 3 for now because I feel like the Texas of old would have lost that game to Arkansas. They would have let Arkansas fully come back, take the lead, and it would have been a big implosion that Texas would have lost. But instead, they held on, got the ball back, scored, forced a turnover, and got a 20-10 win at a place that's not easy to win. Fayetteville can be pretty difficult at times, Tyler, especially at a rivalry game like that. Number 4, Indiana stays at 4. They're still 10-0. They've got to be number 4 in the country at the absolute minimum to people. I'm sorry to people who think Penn State should be ranked higher, which might just be Penn State fans at this point. But, Tyler, the question comes down to, once again, who do you put at number 5? Because that seems to be the big debate about how we're going to do this thing. Who is the 5th best team in football? I don't think anyone really knows. Is it Penn State? Is it Notre Dame? Is it, one of the big 4 SEC? Is it Miami? Is it Boise? Is it SMU? Is it BYU? And I looked at it a bit and I kind of went through it in my head. I grouped all the 1-loss teams together and I grouped all the 2-loss SEC teams together. And I went through kind of who I think is the best right now in both of those groups. Some of that based on eye tests, some of that based on resume, things like that. And at the end of it, I came up with BYU and Notre Dame as the 2 best 1-loss teams still. And I like BYU over Notre Dame more the resume than the eye test. Notre Dame's been killing people, but that Northern Illinois loss still hurts them a lot. And then on the 2-loss group, it's really hard to try to pick one of those teams, but I went with Alabama of the 4. They've looked really good, shut down a Missouri team that didn't have a quarterback, forced a lot of turnovers, absolutely obliterated LSU, and then did what you're supposed to do against Mercer. So I put them together, and then I realized something, Tyler. What has happened the last few weeks I've put a team in the number 5 spot? They lose.
Lost.
So you know who's going to be number 5 this week? Alabama. We're making it happen. Alabama's coming to Oklahoma this week. Give me big money, no whammies. Let's ride.
Oh, you're devious, Cade. Absolutely devious. All right.
I'm manifesting the upset, Tyler. Shades of 3 years ago in basketball.
Well, see, now the problem is you're acknowledging it.
Well, I acknowledged it last week.
Yeah, but you didn't dig into it. You just kind of hee-hee-hawed it. Now you're really, really digging in, Cade. You're really putting it at jeopardy.
I'm tempting fate.
Yes, you are. So, looking at my rankings, I'm pretty much in agreement with you. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, for a lot of the reasons you listed out. And number 4 for me does go to Indiana just because they've done what we've asked them to, have looked as dominant for the most part as you can be. Yeah, Michigan was kind of a slacker. We touched on that last week, but it's a really good defense. Do what you're supposed to, and you're prepping this week for that Ohio State matchup. And number 5, I kind of look at it the same way you do. How do you group, some of these one-loss teams? And when I evaluate those resumes, here's where I come to. And I do this because I feel I don't want to say they're getting disrespected. That's probably not the fair word. But
Yeah.
when you look at all the projections, right? You look at the AP poll, SMU is still behind Miami, even though SMU has not dropped a game in conference play and have been arguably less chaotic than Miami in terms of winning their games. Yeah, they've had some close calls, but they've got it done. Still the only loss to BYU, who's a good team. Maybe not a great team, but a good team. Um, by the way, BYU probably shouldn't be ranked behind SMU, but whatever, AP, do your thing,
Hey,
right?
listen, they've got Georgia above Ole Miss, so hey,
Right, exactly.
what are you gonna do?
And so when you look at those one-loss teams, as much as I hate to say it, and I don't want to sound like some elitist, but I truly think that when you look at the resumes of those one-loss teams, Notre Dame is playing the best football.
Yeah.
I know that, and we touched on. I know that Northern Illinois loss is ugly, but I could forgive and move on because the week before that they had beat Texas A&M on the road. That's got to count for something. That's got to equal out something.
Yeah.
And since that point, since that Louisville game, they have been dominant. They have been dominant, right? Or since Purdue, really. But I mean, they have just come out, played their game every week, got it done. They're not doing anything flashy, just going out and playing solid football. For me, that means enough to put them at number 5. Now, when you get after that, the picture gets real murky. I can't trust Alabama, Georgia, or Ole Miss. I think Georgia's done enough at this point with the win over Tennessee to say, hey, our schedule's been crazy. I don't think it's as bad as Kirby Smart makes it out to be. The SEC, and we've acknowledged this in the past, sometimes is more average than what the SEC coaches will tell you. It's a really good conference this year. It's tough. There's no
Yes.
question about it. I mean, top to bottom, everybody except Mississippi State pretty much could go beat you at any point. There's no question about that this year.
Yeah.
But that's not generally the case. So I think Georgia's done enough that they deserve to be number 6 or 5B, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And so that's where I have. And then after that, man, when it comes to Penn State, the Alabamas, the Ole Misses, the Tennessees, the Miamis, the Boise States, the SMUs, the BYUs, clear down to A&M. I don't even know what you do with those teams, but I do have an interesting thought too. Talking about teams playing good, and I was saving this point. If I had to put a 5 seed down, do you know who I'm going with, Cade?
Who are you going with as a 5 seed?
I'm going with Colorado. I think the Buffaloes are playing good enough football that they should be in the discussion. Now, AP rankings as a whole, are they a top 10 team in the country? I don't know. But if we're just looking at who's playing good football right now and has a chance to really ride momentum into the college football playoff, give me Colorado sneaking up there. I think they're better than an A&M right now. I think they're better than a BYU right now. Better than Miami. Then I think they belong in that conversation with some of those SEC teams, and Ole Miss, and Tennessee, and Bama. So keep your eye out for Colorado. I'll give them a 5 seed.
Absolutely. And that's kind of where I'm at, where it's just the ACC. I've already said my piece about that. I don't need to go over that again, but it's just that group of 4 in the SEC. And I've seen it a little bit already, that argument again that's going to continue to rile up, especially if Ohio State beats Indiana this week. A lot of SEC people are gunning for Indiana should even be in the playoff. Give us, 5, maybe 6 teams if A&M can do something, which they'll have their shot at Texas here in a little bit. But it's just I'm intrigued to see how this week plays out, because I want to see what Notre Dame's made of when they play Army, first big team they've played in a while, and I want to see what Indiana's made of when they play Ohio State. We'll talk about that a lot more in the preview, but it's just once we get those data points, almost, if you want to call them, instead of games, I think we'll see a real clear picture. And, the same thing you said about Colorado, I think a little bit of that can be said about Arizona State. They're playing super well right now. We'll have to see. That Big 12 champion, I think we're at the point where I think we can all acknowledge, barring something crazy, the ACC is only going to have one bid. The Big 12's more than likely only going to have one bid, barring something catastrophic. It's just, I think that's where we're constructed at this year. Which, yeah, is it bad for the ACC and Big 12? Does it suck for them? Absolutely. But that's just how the SEC and Big 10 look this season.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not going to be that way every year. I think a lot of people are going to overreact and say, oh, the SEC bias is in. That's how this 12-team playoff is going to go. No, I think with the parity of college football shown, you'll see years where, you'll get two, maybe three Big 12 teams in, depending on how things shake out. And the SEC might only get a couple. We talked about that in previous years where at the top the SEC has been really good, but it's not been as good as advertised maybe in the middle to bottom. So that's the beauty of the 12-team playoff. And the thing I like about it, and I keep coming back to this, that I like the most about it, is that if you're a fan base that you're complaining, hey, we should be in, we're on the outside looking in, we should be in, go win your conference. It's that simple. It's no different than the NCAA basketball tournament. You want to ease your concerns, go win your conference. And that's the best way to take care of your problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But Tyler, still looking at it here, moving down to the power ranking, the top 3 group of 5 teams. I think the case can easily be made. Boise's still at number 1, Army's still at number 2. I have had that for half the season. That is not changing. I still have Tulane at number 3. I could read off my little notes here. They've stayed the same the entire week. They've stayed the same the last few weeks. They've stayed the same for a month. You know what these 3 teams are. They're the 3 ranked teams in the college football, not just the AP poll. They should all be in the CFP rankings. I'm intrigued to see where they put Army and Tulane at this week, just a little bit. But I've still got my 1, 2, 3 is Boise, Army, and Tulane.
I'm actually going to shake it up a little bit.
What a surprise.
Because while I love the story of Boise State, they've shown kind of some weaknesses in the armor, if you will, where really good Mountain West team. Are they as good as, we make them out to be? It seems, and it's wild to say this, it seems like this is a different team right now compared to the one that challenged Oregon at Oregon.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? I mean, that's what it feels like. Feels like, okay, Ashton Genty's great, but as the season's gone on, you start to see more of their weaknesses appear. And I don't know why that is, but it just is. So I'm I wouldn't say waning on Boise State, but when we talk about, hey, what are you doing for me now? I actually am putting Tulane top of my group of 5 rankings.
Okay. Well, Boise, I agree with you on, but I think we might differ on why it's happening. I agree with you that Boise is starting to wane a bit, but I think some of that is now, we're 10 games into the season. Everybody knows who Ashton Genty is. This isn't week 2 where he can go wild on Oregon, who's still trying to throw 7 or 8 at him because they haven't figured out you actually have to put 9 in the box to stop that guy. And I think more and more teams have figured that out.
And therein lies the problem, because we've seen mediocre to okay Mountain West teams realize that.
Yeah.
And slow him down enough to where all of a sudden Boise State's not as explosive as the team you saw against Oregon.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that an Oregon, Ohio State, whoever could go, they were to play that game, right? Let's say Oregon rematches. I feel Oregon would really take care of them right now, if that was the case, despite the slowness against Wisconsin.
I would agree with that
rematch. Yeah. So that's why they're kind of waning to me. And a team that has learned their lessons from their losses is Tulane, right? They lost those 2 games to Kansas State, Oklahoma, back-to-back games. They've rebounded nicely, really well, and really had that kind of touch-and-go moment with Louisiana. But after that, they've taken care of business, won some of the shootouts they needed to, like against North Texas. And Darren Mensa, I mean, you want to talk about a quarterback that's fun to watch. Another young name that's like, holy smokes, this kid's legit.
Absolutely.
Just a freshman. A lot of fun to watch. Takes care of the ball for the most part pretty well. 18 touchdowns to just 4 picks. Only been sacked 14 times this year, so that's not bad. And then they got Mekhi Hughes as well in the backfield, a sophomore. I mean, what a young duo. He's at nearly 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns. Martin Williams, that's a familiar name, used to be at USC and at Oklahoma fame as well at one point or another. He's their leading receiver. They've got a legit trio of guys there with him, Donta Fleming, and Keith Brown. So that's been a fun team that's really started to come together. And I just think of those group of five teams, they're starting to play the best. So number one for me there, Tulane, then Boise, then and Army, of course, will, as we've talked about, have their chance to prove everybody wrong in the coming weeks. You've got the Notre Dame game, and then you'll have the likely the conference championship game as well, probably against Tulane to flex the muscle maybe there too.
Yeah, so that's already locked up. Army and Tulane will play in the American Conference Championship game. So they're going to be, the way I see it, Boise's going to stay, they're kind of in that position where they're the best until someone proves otherwise. And I don't know if that's going to happen on their schedule, but if Army beats Notre Dame, obviously they're jumping them next week, in my book. I think that would be a pretty obvious no-duh type of statement. And I think Boise, I agree with you. They don't look as good, but I think we'll kind of talk about this a little bit more when we get into the Heisman race thing, talk about that as well, because I think we're going to share the same viewpoint on that. Because when you look at the Heisman race here, there's been a lot of flipping going on the past few weeks. We've talked about it. It's happening nationally too. You're seeing that back and forth of who is the best player in the country. And I'm glad we're having that discussion of not who's just the best quarterback on the best team. I'm glad that this is a year where that is not happening for once. Because I think everyone in their mind has narrowed it down to it's Ashton Jeanty or it's Travis Hunter. I think everyone agrees it's one of those two at this rate. Dylan Gabriel, I still think I've got as my 3, but 22 for 31, 218 through the air and a pick against Wisconsin. That's a deflating performance, to say the absolute least. Jeanty, 32 carries for 159, 3 touchdowns. Travis Hunter had 5 catches, 55 yards, had a nice rushing touchdown in there, had a pick, 3 tackles, broke up a pass. And I think the same thing, if I know the way you're talking about Boise there, I think it's going to be the same way here. At least I'm going to guess it, that you would probably have Hunter over Jeanty at this rate because Jeanty's starting to get slowed down a lot. Which is true. That is happening. He's not as effective as he is. And my argument would be that's the sign of a Heisman, though. When you're that good enough that the entire team is having to rely on you because you are the guy, like Jaden Daniels was last year at LSU, where if he's not on the field, LSU's getting destroyed. And everyone could see that he is the offense. I think it's that same principle, that if there's no Jeanty, we mentioned Boise against Oregon and then we never talk about them again this year. That's the unfortunate nature of this thing. Travis Hunter, you can look at that. Yes, he does a lot on offense and defense. He plays a lot of snaps. He's on the field a lot. This is something that blew my mind today. He doesn't even have 25 tackles this year.
Right.
He does a lot. He's on the field a lot, but his stats would not show you that. He does. Well, he's an amazing player. Don't get me wrong.
To that point a bit, to add on to that quickly, you mentioned Jeanty and everybody's going, okay, now we got to put 9 in the box against him defensively against Travis Hunter, or offenses, I should say, opposing offenses are realizing, hey, we should not go to Travis Hunter's side of the field, where that's through the air, or even in the run game sometimes you'll see him shy away because he can make that play. So that's a credit to him the same way I think it is to Jeanty have to face those 9-man boxes.
Yeah, but the way I have it, Jeanty did enough for me that I've still got him as 1. I've got him as 1, Hunter at 2. Gabriel's down at 3. I think more and more he's going to get phased out. And that's just where we're at this year. I think that is our 3-man race at this point. I still think Jeanty, you just got to keep putting up your 150 yards a game. I feel like that should be enough. And I want to address this too, because this is something that didn't bug me, but it's going to bug me in the future, I'm sure of it. I've seen people on social media already do that. Well, Ashton Jeanty gets 30 carries a game. He should be putting up 150. That's still ridiculous to do against anybody. It doesn't matter how many carries you get. Unless you're getting 100 carries a game, that is a ridiculous number to do. When he's averaging 6-7 yards a carry against 6 in the box, 7 in the box, 8 in the box, he has to have 9 guys on him to average 2 yards a carry to look like a bad running back. That's why he's going to get 32 yards, 32 carries, 30, 25, whatever you want to give him. He has to. That's how Boise has to win. That's why he's the Heisman in my book. He has to have all that because he is the best player on the field. Everyone knows that. The defense knows it. The offense knows it. That's why he's the guy. The Heisman is someone who elevates his team to another level no matter where it is on the field. If Boise State doesn't have Ashton Jeanty, there is no Boise State we talk about this year.
While I agree with all those points, Cade, I can understand them. Here's the problem that you got to realize is happening. I've heard this old Coach Shea and I heard, or actually read about, right? And when it comes to dealing with adversity, when it comes to doubters, haters, right? You've got to be, if they ain't gonna believe in you, you got to be undeniable. You could apply that to a lot of things in life. Early in my life, it was, hey, I got benched in Little League after starting the first year, right? So that was a quote that came up where, okay, now I've got to prove that you've got to play me. I've got to be good enough to where you got to play me.
Yeah.
And it's, little kid, whatever. But I think that does carry some weight here to the point where, and I get to that for Ashton Jeanty in this. We've seen a guy, not named Ashton Jeanty, in the past face those 9-player boxes. And he would still go have 200-300-yard games.
Yeah.
Barry Sanders. He was undeniably the best player in college football at that time. As impressive as it is, like you mentioned, where you could still go churn out 100-plus yard games despite everybody in the stadium knowing you're going to run the ball. You got to do it in a way where it's undeniable because you're not playing in the Big Ten. You're not playing in the SEC.
Yeah.
You're not playing in the Big 12. That's Ashton Jeanty's albatross in this. Not his own fault. Not his fault. Great player. I hope he goes on to the NFL, does great things because I think he's a fun player to watch. But when narrative is a big thing, what Travis Hunter is doing right now, where, you look at his stats and it's not eye-popping, but you realize he plays so many snaps per game and does so much and commands such attention, not just offensively, but defensively and vice versa, that it's a award where, this feels like a year where the award lives up to what it should be, right? You single out a player that you go, oh, that guy's special.
Yeah.
Despite the stats, and it's not a quarterback. And Gabriel, I will say this, Dylan Gabriel is third in my rankings, and like I said, I got Hunter, Jeanty, Gabriel. Should Travis Hunter slip, I think Gabriel might just sneak in there and win this because he's got big enough moments, big enough games left for people to just look around and go, okay, he's the best quarterback on the best team in the country, and he's been really efficient this year.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is good enough to win the award, unfortunately. I hope it's between Jeanty and Hunter, and it's not close for a third. But you got to keep Gabriel in mind because he has that opportunity. But I do think at this point it is Travis Hunter's Heisman to lose. Unless Jeanty does something historic. You're talking breaks the single game rushing record. Even then, he might get called stat pattern, unfortunately. It might be too late.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I think Travis Hunter he's got everything going in the right direction for him. The Buffs are playing well. They're in the conversation when nobody thought they would be. He's been a big part of that. I think at this point, it's Travis Hunter's Heisman to lose.
Yeah, and I agree with you that I think Hunter is probably going to win the Heisman, but it's just one of those, you look at the stats and you look at the eye test like we talk about. There's that difference there, and I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a fun race, though. That's going to be how this thing boils out. It is going to be a fantastic race, to say the absolute least. The first thing I said is going to be the last thing I say. I'm just glad that it's not a quarterback battle. We already have an award for that. We've got other good players in here as well.
No doubt. Let's get some defensive guys on that. Fine.
Exactly.
Let's find some defensive guys other than Travis Hunter. I remember the years where, there's legit talks with Anamika Suh. That's fun. When you got a guy that's just kicking butt so much defensively that you got to put him on there. Let's bring that back a bit because it seems like that has faded in the last decade or so.
Absolutely. Get some receivers get in. Just let anybody in there. Anybody, Tyler. Put a center,
I don't know about anybody.
Put a center in there, Tyler. Let's go back to the 50s. Let's put a center in there. I still can't believe that used to happen, where they'd be like, let's nominate our left tackle. He's pretty good.
I mean, hey, why not?
Exactly.
They ran the ball all the time back then. They didn't know what a forward pass was. Okay, give them Give him come some slack.
Sometimes that is the best offense, though, Tyler.
I know. Maybe.
Maybe. But either way, we got to get to best of the rest. And Tyler, the first game of best of the rest is Oregon, as we've talked about. A game that really, I don't know the best way to put this thing, that Oregon was down 13-6. And yet, at least for me, with how dysfunctional Wisconsin looks at times on offense, I never really got the feeling Oregon was going to lose this game. Yes, Wisconsin had a lead going into the fourth quarter. Yes, they had that energy of the stadium, jump around, people going crazy. All that energy focused on Wisconsin trying to will this thing into existence. And it all came down, I think, to one drive for me in the third quarter where Wisconsin had to settle for a field goal and could not get the kill shot. Because you go up 17-6 in the third quarter, you're feeling really good about, hey, we can get this thing done. Can we hold Oregon twice to one touchdown, and that's it? And I think they could have done it. I think legitimately that was there. But when you settle and keep it a one-possession game, where one of the better quarterbacks in the country, one of the best quarterbacks in the country this year, Dylan Gabriel, just needs to make a few key plays. And that's what Oregon did. They got a few key plays, and they won the game. Now, they nearly tried to do dumb things and ran a fake field goal with 1 minute left. That could have been also on Fraud of the Week if Oregon lost this game. But it did not backfire on them, surprisingly. I don't know why you don't just kick the field goal and make Wisconsin have to score a touchdown. But Wisconsin's offense was struggling enough in the fourth quarter. I kind of understand the decision.
Yeah, it's kind of Dan Lane to be a little cocky, maybe just maybe a little bit, a little bit of the boxing. You expect that from him. It was a weird game, it really was. And I agree with you though. We're going into the fourth quarter. You're going, hey, Oregon's down. Watch out. But I don't think anybody really believed, oh, Wisconsin has the ability to win this. And to that point, Wisconsin may have fired a coordinator after this game. So, yeah, it just never seemed to be truly in the cards for Wisconsin to win it. Oregon, that was the first time we've really seen them kind of flop around since early in the season. It felt like they had been hitting a really good groove. So the early season Oregon team kind of showed up in this one a little bit.
Yeah, I would say Oregon, who has that one bad quarter, that was their big Achilles heel early in the year that I complained about. And this time It was the opposite. They showed up for one quarter. And that was enough to get the job done. Jordan James, credit to him, 25 carries, 121, had a TD, great game for him. Evan Stewart showed up when you had to have a receiver, 10 catches for 92 yards. And for Wisconsin, you're now down your offense coordinator, Phil Longo, like you mentioned, Tyler. You just got to get through two games. Wisconsin's still got to play Nebraska. Man, that's going to be one of the games of all time in a few weeks.
Yeah, one of the games, no question about it. Oh, yeah, where do you go if you're Nebraska from this point? That's a tough one. We'll see.
We'll see what happens for both Wisconsin and Nebraska when they finally meet. For Oregon, it's a bye week, much needed bye week, and then you end it against Washington. I have a feeling they're going to want some revenge in that game, Oregon is. I have a good feeling about that. But Tyler,
yeah, you might see the murder, death, kill Oregon team come out next time out.
We might have to see it there. But one final trip to the SEC, Texas and Arkansas. It's a game we put an upset advisory on, and for good reason. It got weird in Fayetteville, Tyler. It got weird, and it went from a calm Texas day to, oh my goodness, Arkansas is about to pull this off, to, nope, never mind, Texas wins.
Yeah, and I think, and you mentioned this kind of, we talked about this. I think you made the good point that when we were talking about it previously, it's just Texas team in the past loses this game. This is the one they let slip through their hands and go, Texas ain't back, or hey, LOL, Texas is really back, right, guys? Kudos to them. It's one of those road tests where, like we said, it was on the upset watch. You wanted to keep an eye on it just in case. And wasn't pretty, but Texas did what they needed to do, and that's the mark sometimes of a great team. You go out, take care of business. Doesn't always have to be clean, but you get the job done at the end of the day.
Yeah, and Texas, once again, showing why they have one of the best defenses in the country, if not the best. Number one in defensive efficiency. Arkansas had 2.4 yards per carry, only 149 passing yards. Arkansas, really all their big offensive plays came in that second half. They did nothing in the first half. It was a game that a lot of Texas fans kind of had the feeling that, hey, if Arch Manning's playing right now, we're up by 30. Like, this game isn't even close. That was where some Texas fans started to feel as this thing got tighter and tighter. Like, hey, what are we doing, guys? Can we just run the ball, please? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sark.
Texas fans gotta chill a little bit on the Arch Manning hype, because I think the Arch Manning you saw come into that Georgia game kind of exposed that, hey, this kid maybe isn't as ready for the big moments as you think, right? Because they tried that in the Georgia game, swapped him out, and he immediately turned the ball over. So let's cool down on the Arch as the savior type talk. Good kid, going to be a great player. He's a Manning. He's got the pedigree, but I don't think he's quite ready as people think he is right this very moment.
Yeah, the only reason I think that happens, though, is Texas's big one offensive flaw has been discovered, and it's that Quinn Ewers is still kind of injured. And that's not really a flaw, but that's what Texas's flaw is. You know, Ewers
He'll have spots where he looks better. We talked about last week where, sometimes you can't tell. They come out and just be on it. But yeah, he's probably not 100%. He may not be 100% the rest of the season, but as long as he grit through it and still make the right plays, that might be enough for Texas.
Yeah, it might be, but we'll have to see as that situation continues to develop, because any mobility he had, it's not really there. It turns him more into a pure pocket passer, no real ability to improvise as much, and that allows your defense to, okay, we could stay back and defend the pass a lot more. And we'll have to see how that develops the rest of the season for Texas, though. But still, you want a difficult rivalry game. That game is always going to be a nightmare for them. We mentioned it on the show. Texas's first win against Arkansas since 2008. Long time ago. But Tyler, the next one to get to, Colorado and Utah. We've already talked about Colorado quite a bit. And the Buffs they had the spotlight on them. Here's an opportunity to go show everyone this is what you're all about. And boy, did they do it, Tyler. I mean, just an absolute demolition of Utah. We had said this is probably going to be a multiple possession game that Colorado was going to win. And it was exactly that. Colorado just big play after big play. Utah tried to will themselves back into this thing in the second half, and Colorado shut the door on them and turned it into a party in Boulder.
Yeah, it was. I watched this one kind of live Saturday, and it was one of those where it just never felt like Colorado was phased, right? Where no matter what Utah did, you have a bad drive, you throw it away, come back and make a big time play. Defensively, they were able to generate some things, really plugging up Utah as a whole. Travis Hunter got the pick off the tip drill, and it just all the momentum was lining up for Colorado all day long. And it just felt like they knew, hey, we just go out, execute, take care of business. That will be enough. And that's what they did. I mean, it just came out consistent pretty much all game long. Shadur Sanders with another great performance, again, showing why I think he deservedly is probably the best quarterback in this class. And just a really smooth day for the most part from Colorado.
Yeah, and I mean, the Buffalo defense is what really stood out to me. Forcing the 3 interceptions, special teams did a great job with the punt return as well. Just when you have all 3 phases of the game clicking, you're always going to be insanely difficult to beat, especially against a Utah team that is just so beat up. They don't have an offense this year, Tyler. This is what Colorado had to do. Statement win, and they absolutely did it. But we've got one final game to get to, one that you were excited about, Tyler. Boise State, 42-21, going to San Jose, struggled early, faced a 14-0 deficit, but it was, I don't want to say smooth sailing the rest of the way, but Boise turned it on the Jets late.
Yeah, they did. That was really impressive. Fight some adversity, because, you watch that game and you go, oh no, Boise State's in trouble. Wasn't looking good. San Jose State was feeling it early. My boy Nash was him and Floyd Chalk were getting some things done. Floyd Chalk didn't have a great night, in all honesty. But that passing game for San Jose State was clicking early. Dick Nash and Justin Lockhart, they had great games, but Boise settled in. Ashton Genty got his 30 carries, started pounding away at San Jose State, and that's when things changed. That second quarter, Boise found that momentum. You could tell San Jose State didn't like getting punched back, and that's where the momentum flipped, and Boise State able to cruise in that second half.
Absolutely. And when you're able to force 4 turnovers as well, that is always
Yeah.
going to help out whoever you're playing. And Boise State able to take advantage of that. Maddox Madsen had a good game, 22 for 30, 286 and a touchdown. Ashton Genty was Ashton Genty. There's nothing else really to say there at this rate. And San Jose State, they had their opportunities, but it was just back-breaking turnover after back-breaking turnover. We'd get to midfield, try to run a trick play, and you botch the exchange and Boise falls on it. It was simple things like that where you're in position to make the play, you just made it for the other team. You try to overcomplicate things a little bit.
We've seen that happen to teams in the past who, are trying to pull off that upset. Can't do it that way, can you? Cannot do it that way.
You absolutely cannot. But Boise, with the win, still, of course, alive in the playoff race. But, folks, as always, that is going to do it for the Week 12 wrap-up. It's hard to believe that we're getting closer and closer to Thanksgiving, Tyler. We are almost to that time of the year. It'll be conference championships soon and that playoff that everyone's waiting for. It's going to be a fun time. And, folks, as always, we want you to stick around for the ride all the way through to the national championship game and beyond. We'll eventually get to NFL, college basketball, NBA, all that fun stuff there. But, folks, feel free to like the video. If you've made it this far, you definitely should like the video. I mean, if you've watched this hour and a half, you probably, I would at least hope you like the video. But like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, tell us who your fraud of the week was, who your champion of life of the week was, all those fun things. And feel free to hit that notification bell. It always gives you what it says, the notification of when a new episode comes out, so you can always stay up to date. You don't have to try to go looking through to see when we uploaded, all that fun stuff. Trying to get to 100 subscribers by the end of 2024. We just need 7 more people. If 7 random people click on this video and hit that subscribe button, we're good to go. We hit that triple digits. But folks, until next time, have a good one, everybody.